Well, good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Patrick Urich. I'm the Peoria City Manager. I want to thank you for coming out to our second public meeting on adult use cannabis. The format that we're going to do for tonight's evening or meeting is we're going to have a presentation from our Deputy Corporation Counsel, Chrissy Peterson. She's going to talk through some of the issues. And then tonight is really more about gathering public input from you that we can put together into a report and share with the Peoria City Council. So in that regard, we do have a member of the Peoria City Council with us this evening. Dr. Rita Ali is here with us. We wanted to thank her for being here tonight. Also, our police chief and our city clerk are in the back, as well as our communications director, Stacy Peterson. So with that, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to turn the floor over to Chrissy Peterson to let her walk through the presentation to kind of outline and frame up some of the issues for you. And then if you have cards or comment cards that you want to fill out and provide that input, we'll move the computer away and we'll let you come up here to the microphone and talk right after we're done. So, Chrissy?
I'm not as tall as Patrick. The bill that was passed in Illinois is about 600 pages long, so you're getting a very brief overview of that 600-page bill because, as Patrick said, this is really about hearing your comments, not so much hearing the legal interpretation of this bill. But what we distilled down for the City Council really put the issues and framed them up into three questions or three topics. Should the City of Peoria allow the sale of adult use cannabis? Where should the location of those adult use cannabis businesses be? And should we think about and talk about or allow on-site consumption of cannabis? I like this slide. It gives you a great frame of reference for where Illinois falls in relation to the other states. And on January 1st, Illinois is going to become the 11th state to legalize the recreational use of marijuana for adults. As some of you may know, Illinois has had the medical cannabis program in place for several years now, and that has grown. It started out fairly restrictive and it had a limited number of conditions. It has grown to allow for more conditions. But if you look at Illinois, you will see that except for Michigan, we will be the only state really in the Midwest that's going to allow that. So that does give us some reason to think about whether or not the city should be allowing on-site consumption. There is the possibility that we may have people coming into Illinois from other states wanting to use products that will be legal here. And the question that will be asked of the dispensary owners, whether we allow them in Peoria or not, is next going to be, where can I legally use this product? I want to touch 1 second before I talk about what the bill allows on what it does to the compassionate use or the medical cannabis program. It did really just two things. One, the medical cannabis program was originally a pilot program, and the new bill has eliminated that pilot restriction. It is now a permanent program, and I want to be clear about this. I don't think I was very clear at our last public hearing. It allows registered patients to have 5 cannabis plants that have to be more than 5 inches in height. So they have to purchase those seeds from a dispensary. They can have other plants that are less than 5 inches in height, but they can only have 5 plants that are more than 5 inches in height. Also keep in mind that is limited to a household. So if you would have 2 registered patients residing in one household, you will still be limited per household to the 5 plant restriction. But other than that, the bill did very little to change what we know as the medical cannabis program, made great big changes in the adult use of what we can have for recreational. So if you are an adult over the age of 21, you are going to be allowed possession of 30 grams of cannabis, 5 grams of the concentrate, and 500 milligrams of THC, and non-residents are limited to half the amounts that Illinois residents are. That doesn't mean that Illinois is going to allow you to use it everywhere. And I want to stress one thing. The City of Peoria, nor can any other municipality, prohibit the use of cannabis by adults over the age of 21, subject to these restrictions. The state has already allowed that. So the discussion today is not about whether or not we should allow adults over 21 to use cannabis. The state has already decided that they are going to allow that subject to certain restrictions, one of those being where you can use those. Public places, prohibited. While you're in a motor vehicle, prohibited. On school grounds, prohibited, unless you are a student who is a registered patient and you may need to receive it as part of your medical treatment. Can't use it near someone under the age of 21. Not allowed to use it if you're an on-duty school bus driver, police officer, firefighter, or corrections officer. And then any person, business, or landlord does have the ability to prohibit their use on private property. So a few years ago, just like we saw signs pop up that said no concealed carry, you may very well see similar signs that will say no adult use cannabis in these premises. The city does have the authority to adopt an ordinance that would prohibit the sale of adult use cannabis. Again, we can't prohibit the use, but we could prohibit the sale of adult use cannabis. The city also has the ability to adopt some reasonable zoning restrictions. And by reasonable, they didn't lay that definition out for us, but that generally means that we can have reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. They also gave us some new terms in this act that we hadn't seen before. Cultivation center, just like it sounds. They're the ones that cultivate or grow the cannabis. A craft grower, similar to a cultivation center, but on a much smaller scale. In my mind, I think of it like a craft brewery. A dispensary, think of it like the pharmacy. The infuser, they will incorporate the cannabis into the products. A processor will extract or incorporate the concentrate into the product. And a transporter will transport the cannabis between the cultivation facilities and the other businesses that will be using it in their products. And I feel like I should mention before I go any farther that one of the authors of the bill has just joined us in the back of the room. Representative Jahan Gordon Booth came in, and she was instrumental in having this bill passed, and we're fortunate to have her here to answer all of our questions. I'm sure she's thrilled that I threw that out there too. Speaking of on-site consumption, that was what I mentioned a few minutes ago about that is a provision that is allowed in the bill. The city could allow on-site consumption of cannabis in a cannabis or another business establishment. So you could see a facility like a tasting room come up in one of the dispensaries, or it could be off-site. Now, interestingly enough, a business that is authorized to allow on-site consumption is not deemed a public place within the meaning of smoke-free Illinois. So hypothetically, you could have, for example, a bar that's not allowed to have tobacco smoked in it, and next to it, potentially, you could have a hookah lounge or a facility of that type that allows on-site consumption of cannabis, and the products could be smoked there. So it's an interesting dichotomy that is set up. Now, I will say this, something interesting that I think we've recently learned is that where bars have dram shop insurance that insures them against some of the legal liabilities if somebody overindulges in their facility, there is not yet an equivalent for a for a business that would allow on-site consumption for cannabis. So there is no dram shop type insurance that is yet out there for consumption insurance for businesses. And we've realized that is what explains why we've seen very few of these facilities pop up in Colorado or even in California. Not to say we won't see them come down in the next few years, but currently there is not an equivalent. Where does all the money go? The state tax on the cultivation centers is going to be 7% of the gross receipts. So what the cultivation centers sell to the dispensaries is taxed at 7%. The state tax for what's purchased at the dispensary is 10% if the THC is below 35%, 25% if the THC is above 35%, and then 20% for an infused product, so an edible or a lotion. Keep in mind that is in addition to the state sales tax of 6.25%. Then, on top of all of that, the city can impose a 3% tax, which is in addition to the city's 1.75% sales tax. The county can impose a 3% tax. That's in addition to the county's sales tax. So hypothetically, here's how your tax scenario breaks down. If somebody was going to purchase $100 worth of adult use cannabis with products that had a THC over 35%, they have that $100 payment. The Illinois sales tax would be $6.25. The city's home rule sales tax would be $1.75. The county sales tax would come in at 50 cents. The school sales tax would come in at 50 cents. The state cannabis tax would come in at $25. The city's cannabis tax, if they adopted at 3%, would come in at $3, and the same for the county if they came in. So $100 would, your net purchase would then end up being $140 with the taxes. The city has a couple of resources available that we will leave up here for some while we're taking comments. One is a webpage where all of our presentations and research and resource materials are available to view. And then any questions that perhaps you're not able to mention tonight, or if there are people watching that aren't able to be here to make comments, they can certainly email those to the cannabisquestions@peoriagov.org. And with that, I'll see if Patrick has any more comments, or we can start to take public comment.
Try and brighten it up here for you. Actually, and if I could indulge our representative, if Representative Gordon Booth wanted to make any comments prior to us opening up for public comment, I'd like to defer to you if you wanted to say anything. If you don't, tonight, the intent of tonight's meeting was really for gathering public comment for the city council that we were gathering, just as we did at last week's meeting at ICC, but we would obviously offer you the floor if you wanted to say a few words. And thank Representative Gordon Booth for being here as well. So, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I hope to be able to be of value in some capacity this evening. But what I'll try to do is stay kind of high level, and then I'll try to stick around as long as I can. But I do have a kiddo that I try to get in bed by 8, so I don't know how long I can hang, but I'll try to stay with you as long as I can. But what I would say is that this policy was 3 years in the making. We literally traveled the country to find best practices, and we were able to find some best practices, but clearly one of the issues that was glaring as it related to cannabis legalization around the country was that there wasn't equity anywhere. And when I say equity, I mean the people that have ownership of a cannabis facility, rather it be cultivation, a dispensary, a transportation company. By and large, companies that got into cannabis legalization in other states, they were all vertical operations. So essentially those companies would own everything from seed to sale. And there was no opportunity for anyone to be able to get into the space, rather it be security, transportation, infuser licenses, cultivation licenses. Obviously those are the bigger licenses. And then you have the craft grows, which are basically, they're essentially cultivation centers, but they are much smaller canopy, up to 14,000. There will be waves of these licenses. So the reason why this is being done this way is that the licenses will move in waves because equity, I have to give a lot of credit to Governor Pritzker. We talked about equity being the leading principle behind us legalizing cannabis. The reason why that's so critically important is because if you look at the way that the taxation is broken down, you will see that the lion's share of the resources that come from cannabis go back into disproportionately impacted areas. So this community that we're sitting in right now, 61605, is a disproportionately impacted area. So Black and brown communities and impoverished communities all across this state are going to be able to receive a quarter of the proceeds. Another 15% of the proceeds are going to go towards funding mental health services. In 5 years, just the proceeds that go back into disproportionately impacted areas, that's going to be $125 million. And the reason why I fought for that was because you have had communities that have been ravaged for the last 80 years by the war on drugs, and now we're talking about legalizing cannabis and allowing people to literally sell metric tons legally, all the while that all over the rest of the country, this industry is owned solely by wealthy white men. Regular white men? No. Wealthy ones. That's who's in this industry around the country. And so what we were looking to do with this policy is to try to provide some equity so that the industry actually looks like the community. We also felt like it was important to ensure that people that have cannabis convictions, one, have the opportunity to actually participate in this industry that is now being legalized, but then also people weren't having to bear the burden of carrying these convictions on their records. Obviously, having a conviction on your record prevents you from gaining employment. It prevents you from being able to get into public housing such as this. It prevents you from being able to go after certain educational opportunities. And so we are on the pathway to being able to expunge 770,000 people's records here in the state as a result of this policy. But when looking at so that's just some of the high level stuff. There's equity components of this bill as it relates to the Cannabis Equity Fund. So if you are someone who lives in a disproportionately impacted area and you view one of these industries as something that you would like to be a part of, you have the ability to apply to this Cannabis Equity Fund and have half of your license underwritten by this Cannabis Equity Fund. There is technical assistance that is being made available to help folks pool some of these assets together. And then also, I think it's important to add that this is being done with the lens of understanding what it is to right wrongs. I think that's how we have to lead this work, and that's how I have tried to lead this work, and I was proud to be a part of this work. This is probably some of the most impactful justice reform legislation that I've ever had to be a part of, and it feels very, very personal, and it's a work in progress. There's a lot of work that still has to be done. So when we're talking about consumption licenses, this is a conversation all over the state and really all over the country. All of the communities that have, all of the states, that have legalized cannabis are now back at the very question of some type of on-site consumption license. The reason why that is an issue is because if you legalize a product and then make it illegal for people to consume, what inherently are we doing? Let me make that a little bit more sense for you. Yeah. If you don't own your own home, if there aren't public consumption places, where are we sending people to consume? We're sending them to consume in the public, or we're sending them to consume in their car. Well, obviously, we don't want people consuming in their car because we don't want DUIs going up. Obviously, we don't want people consuming publicly because, listen, everybody's not for cannabis. It's a little stinky. We don't want people to have to be around it if they choose not to be around it. That's their choice. What we don't want to do is force people to consume a legal product illegally, because then what happens? Now law enforcement is now put in a very precarious situation. And it's 6 in one hand, half dozen in another. If someone's outside and they're smoking illegally, do they interact with that person? Do they say, put it out? If they see the person again, maybe the next day, do they say, well, listen, I'm going to fine you, I'm going to ticket you, and now we're back in the situation where we have this this strained relationship between law enforcement and the community. Obviously, that's not what we want. So I think that regardless of what the council does as it relates to consumption licenses, it is something that we must think about. We have a legal product. Will there be somewhere legal for people to consume a legal product? And the reason why that's a challenge is because if you own your own home, clearly you can consume in your home, you can consume in your backyard. If you live in public housing, If you rent, you can go to the dispensary on January 1st and buy. Where do you consume? The other, who has been raising this issue the most in Colorado is the hotel industry. You have tourists who come into that state because they want to go to a concert and they want to partake, and then they have nowhere to consume. So what's happening is you're having tourists that are coming in, blowing out the rooms, and they're having to spend a significant amount of money trying to clean those rooms, to clean them up, to freshen them up before the next guest comes in. And so I just want to put that out there. I think it's a social justice issue, public consumption is, but I also understand, to Council's point, that it is an issue that has been slow to grow in other areas, but it is certainly one that has picked up traction simply because it's here, it's not going anywhere, people are going to consume it. And so we do have to begin to think about this in the way that we think about bars, in the way that we think about hookah lounges, in the way that we think about cigar lounges. So with that being said, I hope to be able to stay around if anybody has any questions. I know that they are more than capable of answering them, but I'm also here too as well. So thank you for allowing me to serve you.
Representative, thank you very much for being here this evening and for those comments. We're going to start with the first card, and if you haven't filled out a card and you do want to speak, feel free to fill one out, and Stacy in the back of the room will be able to grab that card for you and bring it up to us. So the first person is Mike DeVita.
Hi, my name's Mike. I just moved to Peoria from Portland, Oregon in February, so that was cold and fun. Thanks. You guys are just giving away houses in the East Bluff area, so I had to get one. So coming from Portland, Oregon, I was there for about 6 or 7 years, and we had, so I got to watch it go from medical to legal, just like I randomly ended up doing here in the 6 months I've been here. So I have some experience there, and just to give you a brief insight on how Portland is now, it's like every block you can buy marijuana for very inexpensive price, and it's totally made the illegal purchasing not only just disappear, but just pointless. My old roommate in Portland was a salesman for a company that sold marijuana products, so picture like your beer guy or your Pringles guy. He did that for a living. I've had friends who had grow operations that we used to buy illegal marijuana from, and then it just was not lucrative for them to even sell it to us. They would sell it to the dispensaries. We'd have to go to the dispensaries. It just got rid of the whole legal portion of it. So I think you guys can do that here, but with the taxes and everything else, currently, I've smoked more California weed here that people have bought legally in California and brought into this state, which is funny. It's cheaper for them to buy it in California, get it over here, and then sell it for a profit, I guess. So that doesn't make sense. And you're gonna just get that if it's gonna cost this much. Getting here, I looked into the medical cards, and it wasn't worthwhile, $500 for a card, and the marijuana costs X amount. I'm sorry, I can get it on the street for cheaper. And it should be easy to get these drug dealers, quote unquote, off the streets by charging a reasonable price. And if you keep the taxes down, we have this whole downtown that's got nothing going on. Keep the taxes down. It's funny, there's nothing going on. So keep the taxes down. People are going to come here instead of Bloomington because their tax is 3%, 6% higher. You're going to get more people in the town of Peoria, create more business opportunity for the business downtown. People are going to buy food. They're going to buy snacks. They're going to publicly consume, hopefully, and that can revitalize the whole downtown, put drug dealers out of business, and just make it easier for everybody. I've never really done this before, so I didn't have any plan of attack coming in here, as it shows. So sorry for my jumbled comments. But yeah, I would just say make the taxes as low as possible. Bring them here instead of a town or two over. We can get the sales through other things and help increase the businesses here in Peoria. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we have Susan O'Neill. Adjust that down.
I'm used to that. Hi. I attended the meeting on August 24th with the City Council, the first real discussion, and I was really happy tonight that the Deputy Corporation Counsel says we're going to limit this to just these few topics, because at that meeting it seemed like some of the members wanted to rediscuss whether or not legalization of recreational adult use cannabis was a good idea. I'm submitting that that ship has sailed, and that we need to focus on whether or not we are going to allow adult use cannabis to be sold in the city of Peoria. When I speak of sailing ships, I want to remind everybody of the Paradise and look at the Levee District in East Peoria. They're gonna, I have no doubt that they are going to allow recreational adult use cannabis in East Peoria. And if we don't want all that income, all of our people driving across the bridge, just like they do now, to go to that nice new Target and the nice new Aldi and all those other lovely shops and restaurants over there, then we need to really think about this and stop moralizing about it. I'm hoping there really are only two issues at this meeting, that whenever the council gets around to voting on the zoning and saying yes or no. Because we already know who's going to get the first license. Trinity Compassionate Care is going to get the first license. That's in the legislation. And we heard at the August 24th meeting that they are excellent neighbors. There have been no police calls. There's been no trouble whatsoever. They have been good neighbors. They help sponsor the Riverfront Farmers Market. They're active in our community. And that's already a done deal. But we need to get going on this, because January 1st is going to be here very soon. And Trinity needs to know, yes or no, are we going to allow it? And if so, where? Because they have to get a location. I know nothing about the construction industry, except it's going to take more than 8 weeks to get something up and running. So I urge the City Council to limit their discussion to these two issues: yes, no, and where. And I am asking you, well, I'm also going to remind you, if you don't get it done by January 1st, then the city is also leaving money on the table. You're just losing sales revenue, sales tax revenue that you've already approved the sales tax if you allow it. So you're just leaving money on the table, and that we have a deficit. That would not be a good thing to do. So I think you need to get serious about it and get it going, hopefully as soon as possible. But I also urge you to put the on-site consumption on the back burner for now. I know that it was included on this conversation in the presentation. It was included on August 24th, but it's my understanding, and my state representative, Jahan Gordon Booth, could probably tell us more about it, but it's my understanding that there's a trailer bill that's going to be presented and hopefully voted on in the veto session that might address some of the concerns about this, where you can smoke it and where it's a good idea. To prohibit it now, when we don't even know what that bill is going to say in its final form, would be a real mistake. I think that everything she said is absolutely true. I'm a renter. Imagine that. You can use this product, but not in your house, not in your yard, so then you become a criminal. And so that's not right. I hope that I don't think we have enough information, but don't shut the door on that yet, because I think that would be a big mistake and potentially a huge revenue source, as well as actually promoting that equity that we talked about. And that brings up that ordinance, 20-112. I am asking you, once you get all this other stuff decided, to consider repealing that in its entirety. And I am still wondering whether Councilwoman Ali or Councilwoman Moore ever got the statistics that they requested at the August 24th meeting, that being the race and zip codes of the people who were written those tickets that got those fines from that ordinance over small amounts of cannabis and paraphernalia since that ordinance was enacted by the city council. I think if we leave that on the books, even if we are just giving those fines to people that are under 21, I just think it is wrong-sided. It's just encouraging less equity and adding up all more fines, more stuff that could land somebody ultimately in jail or to lose their job or lose their house, because now they got a $750 fine for the third time they got caught with a joint. Thank you.
Next, we have Molly Rice.
Hi, I'm Molly. I live in the North End, or near North Side, North Valley, a lot of names for it. I started a neighborhood association there, and I qualify for medical cannabis due to some health issues that I have. And I just want to say I shop in East Peoria primarily because it's closest to my house, because I'm so close to the river there, and that it'd be a really big mistake to lose out on that kind of funding, that kind of money coming in. I would prefer to purchase my groceries and my marijuana in Peoria, so Peoria gets that money. But you know, if it's cheaper someplace else, that's where I'm going to go, because I don't have a lot of money myself. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Katie Sanders.
Hello, my name is Katie. I am a Peoria resident. I am a medical cannabis patient, and I also work at the medical cannabis dispensary, so this topic is very dear to my heart. Every day I get to work with people that have just changed their life over this medicine. I have just seen just a turnaround in people's lives, and it's just so great to see. But I also every day meet people that want to get their medical cannabis card and cannot, just based on the fact they don't have a qualifying condition, they don't have a doctor that will certify, it's too expensive. So just having that option of having a recreational facility for those people would just be so important, just because the need is out there, definitely. Also, I was a teacher before this, so I would love to see that 50 cents maybe raised a little bit more for the school districts, because the struggle is definitely real out there for them. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Gorsuch.
I like to see everybody in the room. Can you hear me? Does everybody hear me? No. No? Yes? No? Yes? No?
You got it, sir. There you go. All right.
How about now? Hello? Test, 1, 2. Can you hear me? I can't hear it. So, my name is Brian Gorsuch. You want to start over?
No.
Sure. Edit that part out, okay? So my name is Brian Gorsuch. I have multiple sclerosis. I'm here to voice my opinion as a qualified patient for medical cannabis. So far, East Peoria and Canton are allowing recreational cannabis to be sold out of the same dispensaries where medical cannabis is currently being sold. This is my medication. I've made an informed decision to take charge of my own health care. With the guidance of my primary care doctor and medical cannabis, we eliminated 23 prescribed medications, folks. Yeah, that's 20 plus years of opiate use. So it's huge. The state of Illinois paid for my prescription drugs annually over $100,000 a year for the past 20 years. And I am one of 20,000 MS patients in the state of Illinois. That's not counting no hospital stays, no durable equipment, no physical therapy. With that said, the patients have funded the pilot program. We have spent our Social Security disability income on medicine that should be covered by the state, federal, and private insurance. Representative Jordan. That's strict, yeah. I got this thing in my throat right now. I'm working on my public speaking. So medical cannabis patients have gotten us to this point. Patients deserve a convenient, safe, accessible establishment to acquire their medication. The medical cannabis dispensaries should be allowed to deliver and have the option of drive-through services. They should be required to have twice as many disabled parking places. The dispensaries should be clearly defined for medical cannabis card holders only. Recreation sold separately. Let's establish standards for all medical cannabis dispensaries to meet. It all starts with our local communities. The rights of the patients that should be respected. Thank you.
Raven Trapp.
Did I?
You're good.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I just wanted to kind of come out to the meeting, and in sitting here, I felt compelled just to kind of express just a few items. One, I'd like to just support what Molly was saying regarding the neighborhood. I am a former East Bluff community member also, and living in that area, there's no grocery stores, no services to that nature at all. And so living in that area, I primarily took all of my money and resources over to East Peoria because, again, that was just the closest place for anybody that lives in the East Bluff, the South End. Basically, if you're going down University, anything to the left going University all the way to the South End, the East Bluff, East Peoria is your grocery stores, truthfully. And so I wanted to just express that because I know one of your topics was location. And so I think that that's a primary that needs to be looked into of where are your consumers. Because if you have East Bluff and South End consumers, but you have a dispensary on Allen Road, they're going to East Peoria. That money is going to go over there. It's easier to get a ride. It's right over the bridge. And again, there's just going to be lost funds. So I just wanted to somewhat support that because I've been there. I lived in the areas, and I know that that's just going to be a challenge. So I think location is very, very important. Another question that I had, I didn't realize that, I think the question would be, are those taxes opposed on the business or are those taxes opposed on the purchaser? Okay. Again, if you're going into, and I think in support of what the gentleman said, if you're dealing with people who have consumed a certain way of life. They've purchased a certain way of life for years. And then not only are you opposing taxes, but you're opposing $40 worth of taxes on a particular product. That person might look at that, I'll just take this $40 somewhere else and go get some product somewhere else. So I just think that the tax thing should be just looked upon again, because ultimately this is about the consumer and not the business owner. This is more about the consumer. Legalization is more about the consumer than it is some of these rules, the regulations. And so if the consumer is feeling like it's too expensive to purchase in Peoria, naturally any consumer is going to go to the best price. And so, and then finally, I wanted to speak upon, I just came back from Las Vegas. I've just been interested in this because of it's a growing industry. It's time to just start learning more about it. So I would be an individual that is in support of consumption on the place, because when I just came from Las Vegas, I wanted to tour a couple of dispensaries. And so naturally, that is the biggest concern, especially for tourists. Las Vegas is a huge tourist place. So, I mean, I literally sat outside this dispensary, and I mean, I was watching cabs and Ubers just bring people, like 40 going west. So naturally, when these people purchase, now what? That's really just the biggest thing. And so, and the dispensaries has so many rules. So what I watched was I watched people leave the grounds of the dispensaries and find a dark spot. I watched people, when I got back to my hotel, gravitate to different areas and locations and different places, because naturally you have to consume. So it's either get stuck with the $300 to $500 bill because I've smoked out my hotel room, or now you're going to have a lot of people wandering the streets looking for places to smoke. And not only are you going to have a lot of people, but then you're putting yourself in a position where now, as the state of Illinois, we're going to have a lot of tourists doing this, because that's something that we have to be conscious of, by it only being us and Michigan, the two states, the Midwest states in this area that are doing recreational. You're going to have people from Ohio, you're going to have people from Indiana, you're going to have people from a lot of neighboring states coming here. So the question now becomes, do you want your tourists to feel unsafe? And now that the legal aspect of marijuana is now getting ready to affect the black market. So now the black market still has to eat, basically. They still have to generate funds. So at this point, now we have people who are tourists wandering the streets, trying to use recreationally, but at the same time, is that going to ultimately put them in harm's way? Because now I got to go to a corner, now I got to go to a crevice, now I got to go to a dark spot in order to use this product. Whereas if I had a place to just simply, like for example, in Las Vegas, they were waiting for the lounge law to pass. So there was one particular place that was getting themselves ready. They had a coffee shop prepared, and they had a pizzeria that was ready to go, and they were waiting on the lounge law. So again, you have hundreds and thousands of people coming all over the world. This is a great business opportunity. You have a safe place to purchase. You can go right on down the way to a safe place to use the product. Naturally, the people will be hungry, so you have a safe place to go and get something to eat. Then you got a safe place to get something to drink, and then you can leave on out and go about your business. Then on top of that, it's a huge business building opportunity. Because in this one facility, you're going to be servicing the people going to the lounge, you're going to be servicing the people who are eating, you're going to be servicing the people who are going to be drinking. And then as a tourist, I came here, I did what I needed to do, I can legally get in a cab, go home, no problems. So I just wanted to express that because I experienced it. I went out there specifically to just watch the industry, and that's what I saw. I went to about 4 different dispensaries, and literally the dispensaries were so stuck on, no, you can't open anything, we can't have anything right here because we'll get in trouble. But then naturally the consumer is like, I want to open this up, I want to see it, I want to smoke it. And then what consumer is going to purchase something to have to wait an hour and a half to go use it? So there's those type of difficulties too. So since I saw it, I just feel that it's a great opportunity. If we're gonna get into the business, we might as well fully get into the business and put ourselves in a position where not only can we embrace it, but then we can also generate a lot of income and create a lot of jobs. So thank you.
Anshuman Reddy?
Which microphone do I use? Oh, thank you. So I come here as someone who potentially wants to invest into this business, but also as someone who wishes to benefit this community in the best way possible. Obviously, the legalization of marijuana is not just a means for our impoverished minorities in Peoria itself, but I also see it as a potential. The thing is, what most people don't seem to realize is that it can also be a mean for those who are unemployed as well as those with physical and mental disabilities. To actually, like, one of my plans is that hiring folks through the Human Resources Department who are jobless, especially people who have been arrested, convicted of marijuana-based offenses, as well as has anyone here heard of a place called Epic? It's a place that helps folks with physical and mental disabilities. They have a horticultural program that helps train individuals. I believe that I want to hire those who graduate from the program, not as cheap labor, but as people who actually get a good amount, who can actually reap the benefits of this. Because I know people have said this before, but we need this revenue. Like, I say this as someone as a substitute teacher, and basically, our schools District 150 needs money. Like, a few years ago, I was in high school when Central was still open, but now it's gone anymore, where our high school are swamped. They don't have enough money. Our teachers aren't as paid as much as they should be. It's pure dysfunction. Our government's, no offense to our government officials here, is cutting back on is cutting back on our funding, our police, our firefighters. That's like our life's blood for our city. We need we need to make sure it stays out of the hands of children. That's the very important aspect to this, however. We do need to figure out zoning aspects, because as my last speaker said, that we need to think about where they can smoke it because of crime issue. Because, I'm sorry to say this again, Peoria is not a safe area. No offense to people who live here. The thing is, I know I'm sorry, I keep saying this again and again, but we need this. Not because Peoria is bleeding out because of loss of jobs. Also, I see it as a great boon to our agricultural community, because we've had terrible weather that's damaged our soy crops and our corn crops. We need something else to potentially turn to as another what's the right word to use? Another source of revenue for our community. I'm done now. You can go.
Thank you. Peter Kovac.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Kovac. I'm a resident of Peoria. I also ran for city council in the last election, and I just say that to say one of the reasons that I ran was because I believe that for decades our city had disinvested from certain neighborhoods in Peoria, 61605, 61603, and the folks who live in those neighborhoods hadn't been able to build wealth so that they could pass opportunities on to their children. So I'm pro selling marijuana, cannabis in Peoria, because I think we need to enable residents to build wealth and give them the opportunities to build wealth in those neighborhoods that have been disinvested for so long. So the entrepreneurs that have been oppressed and marginalized in some of our poorest neighborhoods, why prevent them the opportunity from using their entrepreneurship to benefit their neighborhood by building a business, keeping the money local and letting it flow through that neighborhood, rather than forcing them to go to East Peoria or some other town to start their business? That's the first point I wanted to make. The second was a recommendation to City Council to look into how we can prevent places from prohibiting using cannabis, such as landlords or public housing, any sort of housing property owners. Can we put rules on the books that would prevent a landlord from prohibiting the use of cannabis so that we don't criminalize it in that way, like Representative Gordon Booth had mentioned? Finally, I wanted to say that I'm in support of the city taxing the use, taxing the sale of cannabis, but I would encourage City Council to be transparent about what that revenue generated will go towards, and push for that revenue to be used in the same way that the state has allocated revenue into an equity fund that benefits those populations that have for so long been marginalized and have had their wealth extracted from them. So we could take a lesson from the state, tax it because our city is in dire need of funding, but use it in a way that rights our historical wrongs. Thank you.
Sherry Cannon.
Good evening. I have a couple of points that I wanted Representative Gordon Booth to maybe help us with. I know I heard you talking about it in another setting, and the first one is about zoning and how the law has been set up so that there will be equity in that. And the second piece, I know this is a cash product right now because it's federally prohibiting banks to be able to allow you to put your money from cannabis in banks. And I thought you talked about in the past possibly credit unions being able to be used for that. Could you address those two issues, please? Can you come up here? Yeah, thank you.
So the zoning, space, the issue of, you weren't supposed to. The issue of zoning, as it relates to adult use cannabis, let me move this around. This is uncomfortable. So there were some very basic zoning practices that were added to the bill. So for example, when we did medical cannabis, there were some restrictions that were placed inside of the policy that almost made it incredibly difficult for certain communities to be able to get a dispensary. So for example, you could not be within 100 feet of a daycare in the previous medical cannabis bill. Well, if you go to certain communities on the south side of Chicago, particularly in Hyde Park, there was a license that was not able to be let because of the fact that the at-home daycares were not accounted for in that original policy. And so when you're looking at a community on the south side of Chicago that wanted to, and you had folks from the community that wanted to have ownership in their own dispensary, and they could not partake in that because any way that you cut it, you were never going to be more than 100 feet away from a daycare. And clearly, we're not talking about a dispensary next to Rogies. We're literally talking about people who have at-home daycares, and whether you're babysitting 1 or 5 kids, you're considered a daycare. And so that was problematic. We did create we did create the policy so that there is a specific distance that you have to be away from, that they have to be spaced out. And I'm sorry, it's a 610-page bill. I forget the exact number, but I certainly can go pull it up when I go sit back down. But the other issue that I was very intentional and concerned about is what I did not want to see happen is an overproliferation of dispensaries in certain communities. You go to certain communities of town, you will see nothing but liquor stores, pawn shops. You get the drift. And we were very intentional to ensure that that did not happen. as a result of this policy. But what I will say as it relates to equity, the zoning piece at the local level, on the municipal level, is going to be critically important. So just as much as we're talking about the issues that we're talking about tonight, we have to be equally intentional about making sure that zoning is looked at with an equity lens, because based on where these facilities are allowed to operate will largely dictate who will be able to own them and operate them. So I would encourage all of us to continue that conversation, but then specifically as it relates to the kind of industry this is, yes, this still is a cash business because it is still on the schedule. It is still Schedule 1 federally, but if we get a new president, probably not for very long. But I don't want to make this political. But I want to be honest, right? I think it's important to be honest about where we are from a policy perspective, because if there's a change in leadership within less than 2 years, this could not only leave Schedule 1, but this could be legal across the country. We're not the first state, we're the 11th state. And right now, I sit on the National Conference of State Legislatures on the executive board. Right now, there are 13 other states that are contemplating legalization. I think it's important to share that there are a lot of myths that as it relates to cannabis legalization and this being a cash business. There are a lot of people that believe that, one, there are tons of robberies. That's not true. There are people who believe that money is going in between people's mattresses or buried in the backyard next to the dog bones. That's not true. Those are all myths. Right now, currently in Illinois, there are currently over 20 cultivation centers. We have dozens of dispensaries all over the state, medical. They are all cash businesses, and they are all banking with state chartered banks, all of them, with their primary banker. And you have state chartered banks. Now, federally chartered banks, it would not be allowed. So your national banks, you cannot bank this product, proceeds from this product, you cannot bank them with a national bank. But a state chartered bank will take your money gladly. Actually, there was a lobby day of the credit unions, and they were like, "Hey, we'll take your money. We will gladly take your money." So I think it's important to bust that myth that there is no ability to bank the proceeds of this in a way that is safe and in a way that actually makes sense. So, to answer the question.
Thank you. That's all the cards that I had. Does anyone else want to come up and speak that hasn't had the opportunity to come up and speak yet? I'll say it again. Does anyone have that want to come up and say a few words? Feel free to come on up and just tell us your name for the record.
I'm Malcolm Kinsinger. I'm really from Washington. I wanted to find out what Peoria was doing. It's going to affect what people in Washington. I'm really against legalization, but that's already gone through. And I'm also against you selling it here. I think it's a bad idea. Had an Army buddy that smoked it. That's all he wanted to do was get high. And he had no incentive to do anything other than get high. And you're going to propose that, and that was on a 2 or 3% THC, and you're going to legalize 35% THC. It's not a good thing. I've been praying for south side of Peoria for revival there, and what I've seen tonight, we've got a lot of work to do.
Doug Day. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Doug Day. I wasn't going to speak, but I've got to say something. Under that logic, then I think we should probably close down all the liquor stores. I guess we could look at all the alcoholics and say it all started with one beer. The other thing would be possibly to consider a 10% discount for any resident of the city of Peoria. They could show a card of some sort, get a discount. That might encourage some people from Morton to move over to the city. We've certainly been dealing with for 50 years people leaving the city, not paying taxes, but certainly coming in to take full use of city services and all of that. From the young woman who spoke earlier about making it a on-site usage, when my 90-year-old mother went to Amsterdam, first thing she wanted to see was a pot cafe. She'd heard about it. That's what she wanted to see. I think you're onto something there. I think it probably is really worth something to look at. I think it's probably a very good thing to look at. And then finally, in terms of pricing and taxing, we've got 20 murders so far in the city this year. I'm not an expert. Chief of police back there is. He could tell us. My gut feeling tells me that there's probably some kind of drug war going on, maybe over territory or turf. I don't know what's causing it. But this certainly could be an opportunity to cut into that if we get the pricing right and the taxing right. So that if this product becomes cheap enough, you're going to put a lot of the black market people out of work. Why? Risk and reward. Right now, the rewards are high because of the price. So people are willing to make that risk. If the price comes down, and you know, if you're caught growing or selling illegally without a tax stamp or something like that, you're still going to do prison time. So risk and reward will become a factor for illicit drugs. And it's all in terms of how are you going to get the pricing and the taxing right. And I think it's got to be low enough so that you can cut in to the black market. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jackie Petty, and I too had no intentions of speaking here tonight, and I only just have a few comments. I had my first weed in Amsterdam. I had always told my husband before I turned 60 I wanted to smoke. I had never done that. And when we were in Amsterdam, he said to me, "You want to go get some?" I said, "Some what?" And he said, "You can smoke here." I said, "Let's go." And the first bar we went into had it all around. And I told the man, I don't know what I'm doing, so give me something mild. That man fixed me up. I'm telling you, I did not feel any pain for a couple of months. And I only smoked that once. I left the rest for the maid. And I can't imagine somebody not wanting me to feel good and to have the quality of life I've had since July. I've gone on medical cannabis. And I play golf. I live my life. And I feel good. And why somebody would deny me that, I don't understand it. When it can become legal and everyone can benefit from it that needs to benefit from it. And that's me. Thank you.
My story is not near that good. That's a good story. My name's Anita. I am the nurse at the local dispensary. I've been with them for 3 years now. I've been a cannabis patient for well over 3 years, though, long before it became legal. I had cancer when I was 10 years old back in 1969, long before cell phones and GPS and actually FM radio and air conditioning in your car. We headed to St. Jude's in Memphis. And here I am 50 years later. I was only supposed to live 3 months. But during that lifetime, I discovered cannabis. And before I did, I suffered with a lot of depression. I mean, surviving cancer is not easy. Your life changes in every aspect. So, casual user, closet user, for sure. It was illegal. I was embarrassed to buy it. But I knew it helped me. And I knew alcohol didn't. So I continued that, and it was as an adult, and after I'd received or gotten 2 more types of cancer, and that actually came through the cure of my first one. I started studying cannabis because I'd heard, that this was an effective medicine, and I wanted to give myself every opportunity to survive more than just what was expected. So I studied it, and I've studied it. And I got to tell you, I get that we're going to have some problems with some people that abuse it. You've got that in every industry, whether it's the guns or the alcohol or the opiates. You've got your abusers. That's a personality that needs to be looked at through the mental health. But you cannot deny people access to this medicine. And then when you offer it to them, then you just deny them a place to use it, whether it's in their home or whatever. Well, this isn't about smoking it per se, okay? It comes in so many forms that are going to benefit people. Whether you are talking vaping, which has very little odor, so why wouldn't you allow that in your housing? Okay, why wouldn't you allow that in your parks? You're not going to offend anybody. But the minute we say that you cannot use it except in your own home, we make criminals out of everybody that does try to consume this medicine. And people are thinking, okay, wow, finally recreational, it's another avenue besides alcohol. I love that. I am a nurse full-time at a hospital, take care of people who are dying because of alcohol. I've never taken care of somebody dying from cannabis. Okay? In 5,000 years, we have 0 overdose deaths. That's not a lie. That's a fact. Okay? We've really got to look at the science behind this medicine. They're starting to. I mean, we just passed $3 million worth of research going into CBD alone. CBD alone, and it doesn't even get people high. But they're going to be able to get that at the recreational level. Okay? We can't even give that product much through the dispensary. Our growers don't see the real benefit in that cannabinoid, okay? It's all medicine. We need the research. We're 60 years behind, 60 years, okay? We got to free up this plant. We got to figure it out. We got to move fast. It's coming, and it's coming in a big wave, and it's not going to just stop with recreational, okay? Next is hemp, the market for hemp. It's going to be a perfect avenue to replace Caterpillar in this town. If we really look at it seriously. You're talking mega jobs. You're talking mega income. We've got to quit seeing this as a problem. And it's truly a benefit. And if it weren't for cannabis, I guarantee you, I would not be alive today. Thank you. Another thing, this is a topical. Okay? This makes me illegal in my own home if I don't have my card. This little jar of sap. Don't arrest me, please. Okay? Think about that. It comes in so many forms.
Anyone else want to come forward and say a few words?
Hello, everyone. I'll bring this down a little bit so you can hear me. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. Awesome. As a small business owner, I've actually been born and raised here in Peoria. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 4 months, I've been considering pulling my business out of Peoria because I'm looking into Las Vegas because of this industry. Las Vegas has no state tax on new businesses, so it makes it one of the top 5 states for startup businesses. I'm not in the beginning, but I'm in the beginning of a new wave for my business. I own a bakery here, and I actually have a very rare product. And what I'm actually looking to get into now is if we do allow a lounge to pop up, I will own that. I will run that. I will provide those jobs. I will invest in that fully 100% to create a safe environment for our community to go to. I will provide the food. It's vegan-friendly food. There are no animal products. So people who have dairy allergies, nut allergies, everyone is welcome. And I think that that's what we're missing is in this community, when it comes to cannabis, everyone should be welcome to it. I don't think that it should be restricted. I actually have a very close friend of mine that suffers from MS. I am a personal, I can say that I've witnessed someone go from not being able to stand up because he drank so much because of how much pain he was in to within the last 2 years, he switched all of his medications to cannabis, medical cannabis. Russ went back to work construction. Russ was skateboarding, and within a year, he couldn't walk. So this really does change people, and it saves people. So I don't think that we should be afraid of something that can't kill you. Everybody's got their vices. Everybody's going to use things in their own doses. That's also a personal choice. So I don't think that we should be afraid of people making bad choices because we're human, and people are going to have to learn. So if we have the opportunity to create the safe space, there are people that are willing to do that. But if we're not going to do it in the right way, I will pull my business out of Illinois, and I will go somewhere where I can do it successfully. Because it is very hard as an entrepreneur, being so young, I have no other form of income than my business. And when people don't patronize, I don't make money. I can make a lot of money in this business, and I'm willing to do that if I'm allowed to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come forward? Okay. All right. Just a couple of housekeeping things that I want to share with everyone before we leave tonight, before we wrap up. And I want to thank everyone for coming up and speaking. Tomorrow night, the City Council meets. And first, we do have another City Council member in the back of the room. Our District Councilwoman here for the 1st District, Denise Moore, is here with us this evening. So thank you for being here. Tomorrow evening, the City Council will be taking up on second reading the tax issue. So that'll be coming forward for their action. The reason that we're bringing that forward at this point in time is that we have to have that acted on by the end of this month in order to collect the tax. The larger question, the next public meeting that we're going to have is where, and the discussion of where we would have the regulations in place for zoning. And our Planning and Zoning Commission will be taking that up on October 3rd at 1 o'clock in the City Council's chambers. So that'll be the next meeting. They'll be presenting that. We should have the packet with the proposed zoning regulations out this week. We'll make sure that on this website, on the cannabis website, that we post those proposed zoning regulations so that they're out there so that you can see those as well. The matter of possession, we're drafting a repeal of the possession ordinance. I think that Ms. O'Neill had requested that or just some discussion of that, along with the zoning regulations. That will be coming forward on first reading in front of the City Council on October 8th. And then second reading, which would be their final discussion of all of these items, would wrap up on October 22nd. So from a housekeeping perspective, that's the information that we have for you as of right now. We do have another card. So this is Ann Smith that's going to come forward and speak. Ms. Smith?
Good evening. This is confusing. I would like to speak about priorities, values, things that anybody over 40 grew up with from our parents. I was just thinking about this morning, if I was to think that this would ever come to what it is today. It may be good for some kind of medical use, but would you say, little Johnny, what you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a drug dealer. That would never have entered your mind 3 years ago, 4 years ago. You would have told that child, no, you need to go to school and get an education and do something else. True. I just come from a Christian background. There's one person that stood up for that, for God. That's something that we all kind of grew up in. There's always a use for something, but to overall to do this, you think it's going to help. It's just like the apple. It looks good. It tastes good. It's going to do all this and that. But one bite of that apple turned into a world of sin, right? It's true. I just want to, like the man, I've been praying also. And I'd like to do that again, as I did at the last meeting. You can join me or not. Our Father God, thank you, Lord, for bringing me here. I thank you, Lord, for allowing the people to be here. You have something to say to them. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that if you need to use me to say it, let it be said. And I pray, Lord Jesus, that they'll go home and talk to you. Hopefully you are their Heavenly Father, not cannabis, not marijuana, not opioids. No addiction should take the place of you, Lord Jesus. It should be you they should be seeking, not all these other things, not money. There's other ways, Lord, you know, that can make this thing, as far as economy, work. Follow him, and it shall be given to you. Pressed down, overflowing. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Hi, I'm Gordon. I respect you. I looked up to you. I looked up to your mother. I just think a cloud is over this place that need to be lifted. There's people here that I know believe in the Lord. And if they want to continue being a Christian with Christian values, it does not have to go through legislation to get a point across. It can come through believing in God, having faith, putting on the armor of God. These things need to be first. Before your business, before anything, God, put God first. That's all I have to say.
Piper Petroselli.
Hi. Oh, put down for short people. Just a couple comments, because I'm hoping you guys consider, you have one of the best resources in regards to the public safety and public health policies that will ultimately be developed, I'm hoping that you place a real tight focus on the science rather than science fiction. And you have Anita, the lady with the braid, who is an RN, who, how long have you been open over at the Trinity? Okay, so for the last 3 years, she's been working collaboratively with the medical community and patients of all stripes. And she has the latest data that's out there, that's available, that I hope you will keep science in mind and consult her when the public safety and public health components are put together. And the young lady who said she wanted to open a bakery, I am hoping that the city will consider the tax that we're putting on for the city, for the county, and also keep an eye on what Tazewell County is doing and what East Peoria is doing, because I don't want to lose that bakery or a patisserie. That's what makes Peoria glamorous, is your businesses that come with the growers and all the rest of the jobs and the labs, et cetera. But yeah, I want her to stay. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. But I do hope that when you do make those tax considerations, you do keep an eye on what our neighbors are doing. I can tell you, I live downtown. I live across the street from City Hall. And I shop at Kroger's in East Peoria because it's 2.0 miles away. You know, going into Peoria to go to the Hy-Vee, that's 4. I get a lot of things because they're a half a mile away, PetSmart, et cetera, in East Peoria. If we charge a higher tax rate overall, then all of the good, she's going to take her bakery to East Peoria or Tazewell County because that's where the dollars are going to be. No, don't go to Vegas. Those are the two things that I'm hoping that you'll consider, that you keep science in mind, you use Anita over at Trinity because you have her, and please do keep an eye on what they're doing across the river because we want all of the tax revenue here. Thanks.
Anyone else like to speak?
I was born and raised a Christian myself, and so I put a lot of faith in God and what He provides us. And so I take one Bible verse very to heart, and so I'll read that one to you. Genesis 1:2-9 says, "Then God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you." Now, we've used hemp for years. We fed our livestock. Through that livestock, we got the byproduct. It is food. At the basic level, this plant was always meant to be nutrition for us, medicine for us. It's only because people are not happy with their lives that we've turned it into a party product. Okay? So please, don't ignore the science. It's there. Okay? I love God too.
Sure.
Hello. I just wanted to address one more thing. In my, I'll say, tour of Las Vegas, during this process, I will say in a 2 to 3 day period of time, I got more educated about cannabis than I've ever been in my whole life. It's something that, if you look around, a lot of people have been around it. Because it hasn't been a legal product, People spend so much time going to somebody's house, going in a corner, you're trusting what this person is giving you, you're hoping they're doing something correct, all of this. When we toured those dispensaries, the one dispensary, I was given, they call it a bud tender. So instead of a bartender, a bud tender. And this person literally had a clipboard and walked me through anything I could imagine. How do you feel? How do you want to feel? What do you have going on? What do you want to do? Do you have any pain? Did you have anything on your, this is a smooth feel. This is a rough feel. And I just went through the process to just experience it because it was coming to our city. And I wanted to see some things. But in that short period of time, I was more educated in, like I said, a 2 to 3 day period than I've been in 30 years of my life. I learned more about what this product could or could not do for me, what I could or could not do with this product, how the product would make me feel, if something was smoother, if something had a good taste, a no taste. Like you said, when I went in the store, it was amazing. They have lotions, they have soaps, they have suckers, they have this. It was so many levels to this. And I left there just more educated about it. It was like, wow, this isn't that bad. Because we've had such a stigma behind it for so long, and naturally, if something is not legal, then it's forced to be under a certain, legislation in a sense. But now that you've removed all of that, and so I just really wanted to express that in that sense, that again, these location centers, being able to consume, having it a safe place for people to go. If you do have pain, if you are having trouble with sleeping, if you are battling with depression, you can feel comfortable to go into an environment, communicate with someone, and they can take you right over here and say, this strand can do this strand can help you with that. And then you have a safe place to say, okay, well, let me try the product out to see where it's going to take me and how I feel, versus putting yourself in such an uneducated situation. That's where some of the addictions come from. That's where some of these overdoses come from, because we're so uneducated about these drugs. We're so uneducated about how they're grown, how they're used, how they're this. So you're just trusting that somebody in their backyard took care of something, versus now you're able to go to a store, you're able to look in a glass case. You already know that this has been certified. This has been taken care of. It's nice and clean. It's just a completely different environment. And so I just wanted to express that, because again, in my trip to Las Vegas and just studying that, and I'm sure you saw that in Amsterdam, it's so wide open. It's like, come on in. What are you dealing with? Let's get you right. People are happy and healthy. We're not here to do that. So it's a different environment versus this backyard alley life that people have been living. So I just wanted to say that again in support of, I think we can really make this a more joyful situation. We'll have a lot more educated people, and we might have less addicts because now you educated on what you're using versus hearing about it from your friend. So I just wanted to express that because it really gave me a great experience when I went out there to Las Vegas. So thank you.
All right, last call. Anyone else? All right. Thank you all for coming this evening. We appreciate it very much. Like I said, October 3rd, 1 o'clock at City Hall will be the Planning and Zoning Commission, where they'll be talking about the zoning regulations. Have a good night.